Hello, everyone. I'm Brad from SenseOn. I'm one of the founding team here, so I've been here for over 7 years. My background is security operations through and through. I've built many SIEMs around. Some of them have been successful, some of them not. And from that, we've kind of learned many of the challenges which have gone into building SenseOn of how we can build a great product that gets broad coverage and detection without having to go for kind of the SIEM approach. The way we do that in the market for most organizations, there's kind of two key options. One option is going for an EDR, which could be managed, known as MDR, and that would normally give you kind of broad coverage at kind of a quite low cost, but it would really be focused on just the endpoints. The other option will be going for a SIEM, and that kind of SIEM you'd either engineer yourself if you've got a large team, or potentially looking to outsource that through a managed security supplier. SenseOn enables you to get the kind of coverage you'd get with a managed SIEM, but with ease of deployment that you'd get with kind of just an EDR. And we'll go through kind of how we do that in a moment. So broadly, we're a UK-based company. We really focus on the UK in particular. We've got quite a bit of expansion going across Europe. We've got quite a bit of expansion going across America as well at the moment. But we are a kind of a UK-founded organization. Now, in terms of deployment and how we get data, everything I'm going to do now is focused on the platform itself. I'm not going to kind of going through kind of any kind of slides or things like that. So everything's going to be really focused on the platform. So firstly, on the platform, we need to get data into our system. And the way we do that is we're going to integrate with all of the security products you've got today. So that might be things like Office 365. It might be things like Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. It could be a wide number of integrations of different security products that you've got around your estate. Those products may, in some cases, be things like endpoint detection and response tools. So it could be something like Microsoft Defender. So a lot of our customers come to us because maybe they're having challenges with trying to keep on top of Microsoft Defender for endpoint alerts or other Microsoft alerts, and they kind of need some way of managing that and kind of getting broader telemetry, but they don't want to go for the full Azure Sentinel route. We also kind of integrate with other providers like CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, but we can absolutely displace the full EDR and endpoint protection products that you've got out there. Some of our clients kind of choose us to displace that entirely, and we run the antivirus and the endpoint protection. Some of us have a hybrid mode where we are covering the things that might not be covered by, let's say, an E5 license. Other ones of our customers kind of they use another EDR and use SenseOn alongside us to kind of expand the coverage. But we will hook into any security product that you've got and pull in the data from that. The next thing we're going to do is deploy a piece of software on every system. So that's going to be Mac, Windows, Linux. What this means is there's a few kind of very key features that are unique to SenseOn. Those features include we are the first product to market in the world that does full deep packet inspection on every single endpoint. And then from that deep packet inspection, I believe we're still the only product today that can map all of the network traffic analysis that we're doing on every single endpoint back to the process that launched it and the user, so we can provide context of this user was sending this information to this location, and here's the associated deep packet inspection. If you imagine trying to do that in a normal SIEM, normally you'd have to go get network proxy logs. You might have to go get logs from network infrastructure across your estate. You have to kind of feed that back in. You'd have to kind of correlate endpoint data. You'd have to have other identity information. We do all of this out the box really, really easy with a real small footprint on the endpoint. In most cases, when we're not running the endpoint detection and response component, we're using about 90 megs of RAM, and that's about 0.6% of the CPU as well. So around about 0.5% of the CPU and less than 100 megs of RAM, we're doing a full network capture, as well as additional log collection from those endpoints. On those endpoints, we'll also generate a common log format that's the same across every single one of your endpoints. Anyone who's trying to kind of manage a SIEM knows the first challenge in a SIEM is getting the data and kind of normalizing that across your estate. We solve that by, on every single endpoint, we generate a common log format that's the same across every single system. So I'll give you an example. On a Windows domain controller, we will collect a DNS log, and that DNS log will appear exactly the same as if that was collected from a Mac OS endpoint. Whereas in reality, those systems are generating logs in a massively different format. And then you've got different things in your estate which will generate the same types of logs, but in other formats. So it could be maybe the way you do DNS in the cloud. Maybe you've got some EC2 instances very different. Maybe you're doing DNS in an Inflowbox server. That's going to get its logs in a very, very different way. Maybe you've got a bind DNS server. That's going to generate its logs in a different way. On every endpoint, where possible, we generate logs in a common format, and that means that we can analyze them. You don't have to go to the effort of kind of managing your ingestion pipelines and tuning all of that. You don't have to go to the effort of writing horrific regular expressions for that data as it comes in. And then that means that because the data is structured, we can apply really effective analytics out the box, and there's about 1,000 analytics we can deliver on day one to make sure kind of your detection and response project is being really, really effective. This is a real world box. On this real world box, we've deployed on about 159 endpoints. On those 159 endpoints, we've pulled in, over the last 28 days, we've pulled in nearly 15 billion raw events. Every single one of those events can be analyzed, it can be searched, you can query it, you can get to the bottom of it. And a lot of our customers come to us because they've got cost issues with the traditional SIEM, and out of those 15 billion things, those are things that you no longer need to query in your SIEM. You can come into SenseOn and query them directly. So you can avoid the cost of these 15 billion line items going into your SIEM. On this system, this is made up of 1.2 billion things from the endpoint, nearly 14 billion things on the network, and around about 1 million cloud events from some of those integrations I was going through before. Now, we analyze that, and out of that analysis, I mentioned over 1,000 security analytics. We've turned that into 5,100 individual security observations. Out of those 5,100 individual security observations, those are things often, and we really pride ourselves on alerting to things that are unusual rather than not necessarily malicious. So the way we do that is we look to find sequences of these things in what's unusual, and we group them together into a priority case. And on this system, we've turned 14.5 billion raw events to 5,100 things that are odd into 31 cases. And the way that works in the platform is for each individual observation, we look at that observation. For example, I take this observation, and then we kind of map and look at that observation and going, okay, who is the user? Who is the system? What is the process? Where is it communicating with? And then from those kind of key bits of information, we try and build a series of connections to other security observations, and that hopefully shows an attacker moving through the kill chain. So here's a really good example. We've got a wide number of individual security observations, and we found connections and relationships between each one of those. And as we found those relationships between each one of those, we can build that through into a case, and then we can alert your analysts or our 24/7 SOC to kind of alerting you to, here's a sequence of lots of unusual events that we've come together to build a high priority case. And that means kind of we're really kind of effective at finding a wide range of things, from insiders doing things they shouldn't do, people being negligent, to kind of attackers who are really often living off the land and doing tactics and techniques which might evade traditional EDR. Now, kind of just showing you kind of the breadth of these cases, I'll show you a bit more of this now. This is an example of an observation in the platform. We can see on the right some details about this. So in this case, we can see PowerShell has made a connection out to Pastebin, and we kind of flagged up that we've never seen PowerShell make a connection out to this place before. It's got kind of a suspicious trust, and then using those kind of key parameters, we can kind of look for other things that might be related, but by itself, you probably wouldn't care about. So the next one, we can see the Windows registry was launched by PowerShell. So most of the time, you do not care that your users are opening the registry. Like that happens frequently enough that by itself, it isn't that interesting. But now we've connected that to happening immediately after, and we can see that the parent process was PowerShell, and we just saw PowerShell make that external connection. So suddenly this thing that might not be interesting by itself becomes really interesting in this sequence of attacker behavior, showing kind of the end-to-end approach of what's going on across the platform. Now, if at any point you want to ask questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But before I do, I just want to kind of say these cases will then now get picked up optionally by our 24/7 security operations team. We have a global follow the sun security operations team, and they're exceptionally effective at kind of responding to these cases. So just to kind of show you their response times, these are the response times that we had for last month. So last month we dealt with about 10,000 cases globally, and on those cases we had an 8-minute time to acknowledge. So that's the time from a case appearing before a human analyst started working on it. And we had about a 17-minute investigation time. That's the time it took them to do a full write-up, submit it, manage containment actions, which means we're able to kind of have an average time to resolve of 25 minutes. And having A response time, including containment, of less than 30 minutes for a 24/7 managed SOC is blindingly quick. I'm not aware right now of other providers who are able to kind of keep up with that kind of response. And this is a true 24/7 operation to kind of keep on top of these figures. And some of our customers run this entirely in-house. Some of our customers have a hybrid model where they can run their normal working hours and we can run kind of the extended hours, or things like bank holidays. We'll work with kind of whatever environment works for you. A lot of our customers do take up the managed offering because it is very effective, especially at kind of enabling them to kind of have that round-the-clock coverage. Now, that's the speed of the response. Just a couple of notes in terms of the quality of that response. On every single case, the team will do a full write-up. So this is the example of the full write-up that will be done. This is an example I've taken from a real-world customer for something that I've just changed things like IP addresses, host names, usernames. Based upon those details there, this is the level of write-up that the team will do for every single case. This case notes don't relate to this individual case on the screen, but it shows kind of the depth and the quality of those individual investigations. And there's a case management feature within the platform to kind of track and enable what's been open and what's investigated. But each one of these cases will effectively be just a kind of, this is allowing you to see kind of a case inbox of what are the most important things that haven't been investigated. Additionally, in terms of the integrations, those integrations will include things that have come from other platforms as well. So we'll be pulling in observations from Microsoft 365. We'll be linking that to other things on the timeline, so more relationship to Microsoft 365 or other events that have occurred in other platforms like Defender. And this will correlate against the network telemetry and the endpoint telemetry and the additional kind of logging alerts and information we're having on, so you can do really detailed investigations across all your different APIs, across the network telemetry we're generating from the endpoint, across the endpoint telemetry and the logging telemetry. And then should you also have any kind of, I didn't go through it earlier, but should you have something like a legacy environment or an OT environment, we do have network probes that can deploy into that as well. So that's kind of a quick summary of the telemetry and the cases and how they come together. I've mentioned the case management features and how kind of the SOC is able to kind of investigate. But if you use SenseOn, you're not by yourself. There is a team available 24/7, 365, and you can reach that team in the bottom right using that chat icon, and that chat icon will go directly to the 24/7, 365 team. So if you need support, whether you're a managed customer or not, you can go through and you can ask for support and the team will be able to help you really, really quickly. So in a couple of minutes, you're speaking to an actual analyst within the SOC. It doesn't go to like pretty people in customer success or sales. That goes directly to the SOC. So they're always available to kind of genuinely help you investigate cases and help you with more detailed analysis of what's going on in the platform. So I'm going to talk about the different types of analytics, how they work, and how baselining works across the platform. So that's handled in the component of the platform. I'll go down called experience. And effectively, let me go see what's going on. Out of the box, we have around about 1,000 different security observations that are working out the blocks. And these security observations are things for things we might pull in for other platforms. It might be things from network events, endpoint events, logging information, and we try and get the broadest possible spread from insider threat to people doing things that they necessarily shouldn't, to attackers who might be across the network. We really pride ourselves on having analytics that focus on things that are slightly unusual or rare, because we find kind of attackers are getting increasingly hard to find across the states. It's no longer a case that you can kind of have antivirus and that's it. Often attackers are using methods that they wouldn't trigger those kind of alerts in the platform, particularly when they do something called living off the land. Now, the way we manage this is most analytics in the platform have the ability to baseline, and they'll adapt and learn and change over time, so you don't see the same security observation repeating over and over and over. So this means you don't need to spend engineering time tuning the analytics, because the analytics will learn and they'll test and adjust and alert you to new behavior that we're seeing across the network. So not only are we saving you on the upfront cost of getting data into the platform and then managing that, normalizing that, writing analytics in the first place and tuning the analytics, but kind of we're dealing with all the security engineering piece as well, rather than just the, well, although data ingestion is a security engineering concern, we're really kind of managing a huge amount of the security engineering workload for you to deploy very advanced monitoring across your estate with the least amount of human effort possible for this. So most of our customers would be deploying SenseOn on their endpoints. We'd do the integrations in about 10, 15 minutes. We then probably look to deploy the software across your estate, and we do that kind of automated means, SCCM, Intune, PDQ, something like that. And that means we would normally deploy in an afternoon. So you could get SIEM-like coverage across your estate genuinely within an afternoon with really effective analytics working on day one. And then we look to correlate these together, and as shown you before, we'll correlate lots of individual observations, build them into cases and score the cases. Also, those cases themselves will learn and they will adapt, and they will be able to kind of alert you to new sequences, and the scoring system in there kind of really kind of benefits from going, I've never seen this kind of sequence of individual events occurring before, or I've got a kind of a wide diversity of things that are unusual. Now within the platform, we've got a few different ways of visualizing that data. So that data, as mentioned before, every single one of those records is available to you, and there's a few different ways of exploring those. Let me just go through to the right page. So we've got a couple of different dashboards in the platform. This is kind of a new dashboard that we're working on releasing to our customers imminently. And this is a way we can kind of start exploring that raw telemetry, and we can start querying that raw telemetry in different ways than we haven't done in the past. So, for example, this is just looking at some anomalous data that's been going on in the lab. We can see there's a bit of a spike there, and now within the platform we can go explore that. And if you're not a SOC analyst and you don't want to write SQL, as I'll show you in a minute, you can ask the large language model within the platform. You could be like, right, I want to know what are the source host names who sent the most data on this. I can send the large language model a query. It will then analyze that. It will look at the original results, and it will construct a query and show you in the background the hosts which have kind of sent that. So I can see in this case, it was Andrea who sent 24 gigs of data to, or 24 billion raw events out to kind of the internet, and we can kind of see that he was responsible for that. But kind of exploring all of our data and generating dashboards using large language models is kind of the future we think of. Kind of more junior or analysts, or potentially analysts who people who are exploring this data, but they might not be threat hunters. They might not want to live within a SIEM-like environment. We still have that, I'll go through in a moment, but particularly if you're like a governance, risk and compliance person, there's ways you can explore this data without being kind of a data expert. And everything I'm showing you, by the way, all of this raw telemetry is directly available through an API, so you can integrate this with other tools, such as like Power BI or things like that. If you are a SOC analyst, you can access all of the telemetry directly. All of the telemetry is available through a SQL-like interface if you're an analyst. And we can kind of start visually exploring some of the data. So this is looking at some of the connections, where they're coming from, but we can go into the raw telemetry if we need to. We call that a feature called HuntLab. And within HuntLab, we can run queries directly over the data. So looking over this, I've got 144 tables of information that you can access. And that's everything from group information, listening ports, who's logged in, login sessions, user groups, and Windows event logs, all the way down to some of the deep packet inspection we're pulling from the network. So things like RDP log, SMB logs, SSH logs, things like that. And this is just a simple query showing how you can run simple SQL statements or really advanced SQL statements if you want to kind of explore this data, and you can kind of export all of this as a CSV if you wish to. But this is, like I say, this raw telemetry is truly cross-platform. Mac, Windows, Linux. If you were trying to normalize this in the traditional SIEM environment, this would be hell. Your security engineer would be having a terrible time trying to manage all of this. Now, finally, onto the how we kind of manage those alerts that come up and how they kind of dealt with in the platform. So firstly, if we do detect a threat and we've got the endpoint protection component enabled, we can kill that threat in real time. We've also got the ability of, after we've killed the threat, we can disinfect the system if we need to. We've also got the option, whether or not we've got EPP enabled or not, we can isolate the machine automatically. That's configurable. But really, a lot of the time, because we pride ourselves in detecting suspicious things and attackers living off the land, that's where we need to be a bit more forensic and allow a bit more of an active response from either your SOC or kind of our 24/7 SOC. Our 24/7 SOC is very effective at managing this containment when we see it affecting customers. And that can be managed in the digital estate. And in digital estate here, we can see kind of there's a wide number of individual systems here. And on each one of these, we've got some quick actions. Depending on how we've set it up, we can do quick actions such as isolate the device from the network. We can do things like suspend accounts on things like Microsoft 365. We could revoke MFA tokens using quick actions, or we can drop into a remote shell on the system to do far more detailed forensics actions. And that's cross-platform. So we've got the ability to drop into Windows, Linux, Mac, and we can kind of enable that on a per host basis across the estate. So that was a fairly quick canter through of different parts of the platform. So in short, like SenseOn is a very, very different approach to kind of achieving really effective security monitoring across your estate. So traditionally, as I kind of said at the start of the call, you could go for an EDR. EDR would give you broad coverage, mostly only of endpoints, but it's really only focused on threats that are like malware running on those individual endpoints. Or you could look at kind of going for the SIEM option. The SIEM option, you're going to have to buy a whole bunch of tools. You're going to probably have to buy a SIEM. You're going to have to buy EDR on top of that. You'd probably have to buy an NDR. You'd probably have to kind of maybe look at some automation like a SOAR platform on top of that. And you're probably going to have a lot of experience and security engineering teams to kind of get effective with that. And it might take an incredibly long time to do that. SenseOn is a way, because we've got the ability to work with your existing tooling, so we don't have to displace things straight away. We could do that. We don't have to do that. We can work with your existing environment to give you the coverage to enable you to get that kind of SIEM-like coverage that you've already desired across your estate without having to deploy and go through that engineering approach of doing all that data management and kind of making things really, really complicated and giving you frankly quite ambiguous outcomes that you might get if you went for a SIEM project delivered by a partner. So we're really, really effective kind of helping a large number of organizations achieve that detection and response goals across their environment. And we can back that optionally through a 24/7 team as well. Yeah, that's everything from me. I haven't seen any questions come through, but I didn't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add to today's comments.
Thanks, Brad. I think that covers it from my end as well. Let's just open it up for our attendees for any questions that they might have. There's a chat functionality, Q&A functionality here. A anonymous attendee mentioned, how is the system priced, Brad?
Great question. So there's two key ways. So the first way is done on a per endpoint basis. So for the core platform functionality, pretty much everything I've shown you today, we do it on a per endpoint basis. So that means you don't have the kind of bill shock that you get when you go for a SIEM where you have a variable ingestion. Variable ingestion inevitably means you've got variable ingestion costs. So we can license it and get that coverage on kind of a per endpoint basis. What we can do is we also sometimes come across environments where the SenseOn core components of our kind of core logging and our kind of core data isn't necessarily enough, and there's one particular log source they need. So additional log sources can be priced separately as well, but we can go into that if needed to. In terms of product integrations, we've got a wide number of integrations. We are constantly adding new integrations all the time. Whatever I tell you about integrations will inevitably not be true next week, because we are releasing a new integration to the platform pretty much every single week. We have a full bi-directional API. We have integrations already with EDR providers, AV providers. I need to check. I'm pretty sure we've got one already in beta for Trend Micro. We don't have one today for Darktrace email. However, we do have ones for other email providers, and there's nothing stopping us from doing one, as far as I'm aware, technically with the Darktrace email. But we have similar integrations with other products. So that is something we could prioritize very, very quickly to get out there. Any other questions?
Well, thanks, so Brad. It feels to me that that is the final question here. And thanks so much, Brad. It's been very insightful to hear you speak about the company and our product. And this actually concludes our webinar for today. As a quick reminder for everybody on the phone, this session was recorded, and you'll receive a link to the recording in your inbox within the next 24 hours. And be sure to keep an eye on our website or your inbox for upcoming webinars and events that we've got planned. We're always very excited to bring more valuable content to you guys. And on behalf of Brad and the entire team at SenseOn, thank you again for attending today's webinar. We very much appreciate your time and engagement. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. Goodbye, everyone.